Good morning. I'm Jackie Stevens from Grace Fellowship Baptist Church in Meridian, Mississippi, and I teach the adult Sunday school class. Today we are continuing our study of humor in the Bible, although I'm sure after today's lesson you're going to think I might have not been truthful about that matter. Today our lesson is from Ecclesiastes and seems the exact opposite of what we studied last week. This week we're looking at a book that is probably a great puzzle. And to me, even from childhood, I've always thought of this book as the upside down book. In other words, so much in it is the opposite of what many of us subscribe to or find within our value system. So looking at Ecclesiastes, let's get a little background. First, many people attribute it to Solomon, but most Bible scholars agree it was probably written after the time of Solomon, and really there's very little reference after chapter 2 that he had anything to do with it. It seems to be a teacher, and he is basically concerned with three things which are somewhat interesting. One is that it is the pointlessness of human endeavors and the mysteries of God, and the last, the inevitability of death. He also goes on about human limitations versus the fact that God doesn't have any limitations. So in seeing these, we're going to find that much of what we study in the book of Ecclesiastes may be painful. And I know, from being a teacher for many years, that learning can be painful. It can be uncomfortable. And so today we're probably going to look at some things that to each of us might seem uncomfortable or painful. Many people call this author of this book a cynic and not a positive thinker. And I think you would probably have to agree with that if you've done any reading in the book of Ecclesiastes. So let's take a look at our scripture lesson for today. And again, I'm reading from my study Bible, chapter 7, 1 through 6. A good name is better than fine oil, and the day of death better than the birthday. It is better to go to a house in mourning than to a house party, because that is everyone's destiny, and the living should take it to heart. Aggravation is better than merriment, because a sad face may lead to a glad heart. The wise heart is in the house that mourns, but the foolish heart is in the house that rejoices. It is better to obey the reprimand of the wise than to listen to the songs of fools, because the fool's merriment is like nettles cracking under a kettle. That too is pointless. So let's examine some of this. Now, if you're not thoroughly puzzled in comparison to how we talked about a cheerful heart last Sunday as opposed to this one, that it's better to be in the house of mourning. So let's examine this. How this author seems to pour cold water on our cheerful heart. He's telling us that we should do things like avoid a party. We should look for funerals, or we should look for loss, or disappointment would be much better than any type of celebration. Well, if we look at this, we could say, well, one thing we might examine is how we get rid of illusions. There are many times in our upside down world that we are faced with illusions that we really have to deal with. First, let's take a look at this house of mourning. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. In his book, Against the Grain, Ray Waddell describes what the house of mourning feels like for us today. Now, I dare say there's anybody listening to me this morning who has not lost a loved one, who has not lost a job, who has not been sorely disappointed in someone they love or care for, or has been abused or used unfairly. So this is what he says about the house of mourning. It's where you sit and wait without glancing at your watch, because the hours no longer matter. You plan nothing, you take control of nothing, not time, not your schedule, your head swims. Grief, relief, exhaustion all keep returning, doubling back all at once. After a while, you think you are over it. No. The rambunctious emotions fly hidden in the clouds, then dive bomb from a dozen directions. We've all spent time in the house of mourning, and frankly, we have no desire to go there again. It just isn't something we want to do. But suffering can be a great teacher. We all want to get through a bad time to that point at which we can exhale, meaning I came through it on the other side. But we find in these moments of loss or mourning or disappointment or challenge that we gain new clarity about the things that really matter. Now, many of us have found that some problems can be solved with money, but we know there are many situations that arise in life that money absolutely will not address. There's no way, there's no amount of money on the earth that will pay or change what happened. We learned that the good stuff matters. That might be a good book, good work, that feeling of satisfaction when a job is well done, good relationships, good fun, good times with family and friends. In the house of darkness, we start to see very clearly how frivolous and useless many of our pursuits are. So truth in the house of mourning are not going to be learned at a party. I think that's an interesting idea that most of us might not necessarily want to focus on. Ironically, the truths we learn in darkness can teach us about living in the light. Sadness can be better than laughter when it prompts us to change. And that, I think, is one of the keys of today's lesson. Waddle goes on to have this to say: you don't move permanently into the house of mourning, you just sort of rent space there. It contains one room, cave-like, unplugged, and that's where work gets done. The house of mourning is a school of adulthood, the place to plot the next steps ahead, with the wind of the ancestors pushing from behind. Moving on, and I think this is important, will mean moving out of the house of mourning, but always carrying something of it with you. What you learn when you are down is important. The next idea in getting rid of some of our illusions is the rebuke of the wise. Now, I don't know about you, but when my dad used to sit us down, and I can still see the three of us around the dining room table or the kitchen table, and Daddy is having one of his talks. We all agreed growing up we'd much rather get a whipping than get one of Daddy's talks, because the talks focused in on our behavior or our sin or lack of behavior or whatever it might be, and really made us think about what we were doing. My dad was a very wise man, and it was hard to take some of the lessons we had to learn. Rebuke indicates we've done something wrong. My husband and I have a joke because we grew up in the era of the Fonz, which was a friend on Happy Days, I believe was the name of the TV program, and America watched it with great relish. Well, Fonz had a problem in that he never admitted he was wrong. He would go, I would, it would just never come out. So when things happen around our house, Dave and I will often look at each other and say, I was wrong. But we're not happy to be faced with these situations. The idea that we have made unwise choices, the idea that we have been foolish, that our behavior has hurt other people. So in changing course, it's important that we listen to that. It also requires, when we are rebuked, that someone is superior to us. And most of us really don't want to face that type of situation. We don't want to admit that maybe they are farther along in their journey and their understanding. As a teacher, I was always amazed at the various maturity of fifth graders. I had some fifth graders who were 10 or 11, and they were going on 30. I had others who actually might be 12 in the fifth grade, and they were so immature that you just wanted to grind your teeth. It is amazing how people seem to be implanted with the ability to make good decisions or bad decisions. So many times when we're being rebuked from a standpoint of age or experience, or someone whose journey is further along and they have experienced some of the things we have been rebuked for. And it's also foolish for us to think that we don't make mistakes or that we know everything there is to know. There's no way we can be an expert in everything. The last thing we want to consider is the laughter of fools. Now, I know that everybody within my hearing has done some really foolish things. And if you think about them, you are embarrassed. Many of them you don't remember. You absolutely have no recall of the event. Others are certainly planted on your memory and you remember all of it. But the preacher says that we can see so much foolishness around us. We see the way people behave, we see the things they say, the way they spend their money, the decisions they make, and they end up in places that they are always surprised. What we are looking for is we are looking for God. We're looking for love, we're looking for meaning and joy. Unlike the country music song, Looking for Love, that talks about looking for love in all the wrong places, we want to focus where we're looking and where we behave. We're looking for ultimate satisfaction, and that cannot be found in wine or work or sex or money or the right neighborhood or the right club or whatever. It is investing our lives in good pursuits, in not chasing after fool's gold. When we think about this, think of what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? He goes on to tell his listeners about the birds of the air and the lilies of the field, and that God takes care of them. Surely He's going to take care of you. We are not to worry about material things. I think in this time of our pandemic, we have all re-examined what is really important. And it's been a real eye-opener for everything, no matter where you are in your journey of life, you have come to consider, what can I do? What can I accept? And how am I going to deal with it? We realize that Jesus would, and the preacher from Ecclesiastes, would tell us that many of our pursuits are foolish. That we want to be remembered, that we are looking at our ultimate demise at some point. And so the things we do and the way we think and how we speak matter. We need to be honest with ourselves. We need to be honest with each other. We need to tell the truth. We need to impart wisdom. We need to be able to accept wisdom. And all of this can lead to a path of deeper joy. I want to close with these words. Like the preacher, we want to have an honest faith, God. We're weary of pious platitudes and easy answers. And this sentence really spoke to me. We want a faith strong enough to withstand the storms of life that we will have to face. Lead us to truth so that we might laugh the laughter of the wise man. Amen. Thank you for joining me.